The morning sun rose slowly over the village of Njoro, painting the sky in soft colors of orange and gold. The birds sang gently, and the air carried the smell of dust and flowers. But that morning was not like any other. The village was quiet, heavy with sadness. The people walked slowly toward the big baobab tree at the edge of the village, where the burial ground lay. They had come to say goodbye to Amelie, a woman who had touched every life in Njoro. She had been a healer, a helper, and a friend. If someone fell sick, Amelie was there. If a child cried from hunger, she would share her food. She never asked for anything in return. Her kindness was her gift to the world. Now she was gone. Her only son, Kato, stood beside the grave with tears streaming down his face. His heart felt empty. Amelie had been his whole world, the one person who always believed in him. Now all that remained was silence. The villagers gathered around him, singing softly as they lowered her body into the earth. Their voices rose and fell like the wind through tall grass, a song of peace and farewell. When the last handful of earth was placed on the grave, the elder of the village, Baba Jumo, lifted his hands and spoke, "May her soul rest in peace. The ground will hold her gently. She has done no wrong." Everyone nodded, and slowly they went back to their homes. Kato stayed behind. He knelt near the grave and touched the soil. It was still warm from the morning sun. "Sleep well, Mama," he whispered. "You deserve peace." That night the village was quiet. The crickets sang and the moon hung low over the trees. Kato sat alone in his mother's hut, staring at her woven basket and her little clay pots. He remembered her voice telling him stories as a child, stories about kindness, truth, and the power of a clean heart. He wanted to believe she was at peace, resting among the ancestors. But peace did not come. The next morning, before sunrise, a young boy ran through the village shouting, "Amelie! Amelie has returned." The villagers ran toward the burial ground. Their feet kicked up dust as they came to a stop near the grave. What they saw froze them in place. There, lying beside the mound of earth, was Amelie's body. Her white cloth was clean, untouched by dirt. Her face looked calm, as if she were only sleeping. There was no sign of harm. It was as if the earth itself had lifted her out gently and laid her down. Baba Jumo gasped and crossed himself. The women covered their mouths. No one spoke for a long moment. Then an old woman whispered, "She will not stay buried." Fear spread through the crowd. Some said it was witchcraft. Others said her spirit was angry. "Maybe someone wronged her," said one man. "Maybe she died with an unfinished word." Kato could not speak. His legs felt weak as he looked down at her. "Mama," he whispered, "why did you come back?" The elders decided to bury her again that same day. They dug a deeper grave, poured clean water over it, and prayed. Baba Jumo said, "The earth will take her this time. The ancestors will guide her home." That night the people stayed indoors. No one sang, no one laughed. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. But when the rooster cried the next morning, another scream filled the air. It was the same young boy. "She's back again." The villagers ran once more, hearts pounding. There she was, lying beside the grave, peaceful and untouched, her face shining faintly under the morning sun. The soil looked untouched too, smooth and undisturbed, as if she had never been buried at all. Now the fear was stronger. Some villagers refused to go near. Others whispered prayers under their breath. Baba Jumo tried to stay calm. "The spirits are restless," he said. "Something is not right. Until it is made right, she cannot rest." Kato knelt beside her again, tears falling silently. He held her hand, and for a moment he thought he felt warmth, just a trace, faint but real. "If you can hear me, Mama," he whispered, "tell me what I must do. Tell me how to help you rest." The villagers buried her one more time. This time they sang louder, as if to drown their fear. They lit candles, burned herbs, and prayed late into the night. But even so, many were too afraid to sleep. In the morning the same boy did not shout. He only walked slowly through the village, his face pale. "She's back," he said softly. The people didn't run this time. They walked slowly, trembling. And once again they saw Amelie lying there, her face soft and calm, her white cloth glowing in the light. Kato fell to his knees and cried. The others stood behind him, whispering, "She cannot stay buried." But why? That night the wind blew hard across Njoro. The trees creaked, the firelight flickered, and the people locked their doors. But Kato did not sleep. He sat near the grave, staring at the moonlit ground. His mother's spirit was trying to speak, he could feel it. The night air seemed to hum with her presence. And as the wind brushed past him, carrying the scent of wildflowers, Kato thought he heard something, a faint whisper like her voice calling his name. He turned quickly but no one was there. Only the tall grass moved softly in the breeze. He shivered and whispered back, "I will listen, Mama. Whatever you're trying to say, I will find the truth." Behind him, the village lights flickered one by one. The world felt different now, quieter, heavier. Something unseen had woken in Njoro and everyone could feel it. Emily could not stay buried. Not until her secret was known. The nights in Njoro had grown strange since Emily's burial. The village that once laughed under the stars now sat in silence after sunset. The people whispered stories about the woman who would not stay in the ground. Some said she had unfinished business. Others believed the spirits had rejected her. A few even thought Cato had done something wrong and that her soul was trying to warn him. Cato did not listen to their words. His heart was too heavy to care. Every morning he went to the graveyard to find his mother's body lying gently beside the grave, her face calm, her white cloth still clean. He would cover her again, tears falling quietly as he begged, "Please, Mama, please rest." But every time he came back she was there again, peaceful, silent, and still. He could no longer sleep. He sat awake at night, staring into the fire in his small hut. The shadows on the walls seemed to move like whispers. The flickering flames reminded him of her laughter, her stories, her voice. He remembered the nights when she would sing him to sleep, her soft words floating through the air like music. Now the same air felt different, cold and restless. One night, when the moon hung high and full, Cato sat near the fire again. The wind outside grew stronger, pushing against the door. The trees swayed and whispered in the dark. He rubbed his eyes, tired from days without sleep. Suddenly the wind slipped through a crack in the wall and in it, he heard a sound, faint, gentle, familiar. It was his mother's voice. "My child," it said, carried softly by the air. "The land cannot hold me. The truth lies under my grave." Cato froze. His heart began to race. He looked around the hut, but he was alone. The voice came again, soft as the rustle of grass. "Find it, Cato. The land remembers what men have forgotten." Then the wind died down and the room fell still. Cato sat there for a long time, unable to move. He wanted to believe it was just his tired mind playing tricks, but deep inside he knew the voice was real. He had always trusted his mother's spirit. She was not someone who would frighten him without reason. He tried to tell himself to rest, but he couldn't. His hands shook slightly as he whispered to the empty air, "What truth, Mama? What are you trying to tell me?" There was no answer. Only silence. Outside, the moonlight painted the ground silver. The graveyard was not far, just beyond the line of old trees that marked the end of the village. He thought of waiting until morning, but something deep inside him said, "Go now." He took a lantern, wrapped himself in a blanket, and stepped into the night. The air was cool and smelled of rain. The path to the burial ground was empty, but he could hear the frogs croaking and the crickets singing. The sound of his own footsteps felt too loud in his ears. When he reached the graveyard, he stopped for a moment. The air there felt heavy, thick, like the world was holding its breath. The lantern light flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the graves. Cato walked slowly to his mother's resting place. The soil looked smooth, untouched since the last burial. He knelt beside it and touched the earth. It was cold, almost damp. "Mama," he whispered, "I'm here." The wind blew again, soft and slow. The trees rustled gently. He thought he heard her voice again, faint like a sigh. "Look beneath," it seemed to say. He pressed his hand deeper into the soil, letting it crumble between his fingers. Something about it felt strange, too light, too soft, as though it was waiting to be moved. He brushed away a small patch, but there was nothing, only dirt and roots. Then he noticed something. Just near the base of the grave, half hidden by weeds, was a small piece of wood. It was no larger than his hand. He leaned closer, brushing it gently. It looked like the corner of a box, old, weathered, but not part of the coffin. His heart beat faster. He wanted to dig, but he had no tools. He used his hands instead, scraping the earth slowly and carefully. The wind rose again, blowing against his back, but he didn't stop. Soon more of the box was visible. It had carvings on it, faded patterns that looked familiar. He had seen similar designs on his mother's old chest when he was a child. He paused and whispered, "Is this what you wanted me to find?" For a moment, the lantern flame flickered as if the air itself answered him. Cato looked around, his breath visible in the cool night air. He felt no fear now, only a deep, aching sadness mixed with determination. Whatever secret was buried here, his mother wanted him to uncover it. He could not rest until she could. But he was tired and the soil was too hard to dig any deeper without help. He decided to stop and return in the morning. He covered the small hole again, marking it with a stone so he could find it later. As he stood to leave, he turned back once more to the grave. The moonlight touched the mound gently, making it shine faintly like silver. "I will come back, Mama," he whispered. "I promise. Whatever truth lies here, I will find it." The wind brushed through the trees again, softer now, almost like a sigh of peace. Cato walked back home slowly, holding the lantern close. The village was silent as he passed. But in the stillness of the night, he felt his mother's presence, calm, patient, and watching over him. He knew then that this was not a curse. It was a message. She could not rest because something in her story remained hidden. As he reached his door, he looked back once more at the moonlit path and said softly, "Tomorrow I will know." Inside, the fire had gone out, but his heart burned with a new light, the light of truth waiting to be found. The night faded slowly into dawn, and the first touch of sunlight reached over the hills of Njoro. The air smelled fresh after a long night of wind. Cato had not slept. He waited for the sun, his heart full of worry and questions. He thought about his mother's voice, the whisper that had told him, "The truth lies under my grave." Those words stayed with him, repeating in his mind like a song that would not end. As soon as the sky turned pale, Cato took his hoe and hurried to the graveyard. The ground was still cool with morning mist, and his breath came out in small white clouds. Birds were just beginning to sing and the village was quiet. He reached his mother's grave, where he had left a small mark the night before. For a moment he stood there, his hands trembling slightly. He whispered, "I came back, Mama. Show me what you wanted me to see." He set the lantern on the ground, though the light of morning had already begun to spread. Then he started to dig. At first it was slow, the earth was damp and heavy. But soon something caught his eye. Beneath the layer of soil, something glimmered faintly, like metal touched by the sun. He stopped, bent down and brushed away the dirt with his fingers. A small edge of wood appeared, dark and smooth. His heart jumped. It was the same shape he had seen in the night, a small box half buried in the ground. Cato dug more carefully now. Bit by bit he uncovered the box. It was old and covered in mud, but the carvings on it were still there, the same kind of pattern his mother used to draw on her baskets and cloth. He wiped the dirt away and whispered, "This is yours, isn't it, Mama?" The box had a small latch, rusty but still strong. Cato hesitated. The wind was quiet and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he opened it slowly. Inside was a small bundle of papers tied with string, and beside them, a golden locket that glowed faintly in the morning light. The locket was simple but beautiful. Cato recognized it immediately. His mother had worn it every day until the day she died. He picked it up gently, holding it in his palm. The metal felt warm, almost alive. He opened it and found a small picture inside, a young Emily smiling beside a man he did not know. He stared at it for a long time before turning to the papers. The pages were old and fragile, some written in faded ink, others stamped with the village seal. He spread them out carefully on the ground, reading each line slowly. As he read, his heart began to pound. The papers told a story he had never heard before. Years ago, when Njoro faced a great famine, the people had no food and no money. Many were sick and starving. The elders had begged for help from nearby towns, but no one came. Emily, who owned one of the largest pieces of farmland, had offered her land to feed the village. She had sold it to buy food, seeds, and medicine. Her land had saved them. But when the famine ended, the elders had not returned her land. They had changed the village records, removing her name and placing their own. The papers showed this clearly, the signatures, the seals, the lies. Emily had been erased from history. Cato's hands shook as he held the documents. He remembered how his mother used to sit quietly when people spoke of the elders' lands. She never said a word about her sacrifice. She never told him what she had done. She had smiled, worked, and lived simply, never asking for anything in return. But her heart had carried a secret, a deep wound that even death could not hide. Tears filled Cato's eyes as he whispered, "You gave them everything, and they forgot you." The wind picked up gently, moving the edge of one paper. It brushed against his hand like a soft touch. He looked up at the grave and felt a sudden warmth, as if the morning sun had reached him through her spirit. He closed his eyes and said, "I understand now, Mama. The truth was buried with you." He gathered the box and its contents, holding them close as he walked back home. The sun was brighter now and the village was waking. Smoke rose from cooking fires and roosters called in the distance. But Cato walked past it all, lost in thought. Inside his hut, he placed the box on the table and sat beside it. He opened the locket again and traced the outline of his mother's face with his finger. He remembered her voice, her laughter, her kindness. He remembered the time she gave food to others even when they had little. It made sense now, she had done it before long ago when the village was starving. He looked at the papers again. The truth was there, proof that she had been wronged. He knew what he had to do. He had to show the village who she really was. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows grew long, Cato went to the elders' meeting hall. It was a place of respect, where only truth was meant to be spoken. The elders sat in a circle, their faces old and tired. Some had known Amelie, others were too young to remember the famine. When Cato entered, they looked at him with curiosity and caution. He bowed slightly and said, "I come with something that belongs to the people of Njoro, and something that belongs to my mother." He placed the box on the table. Slowly he opened it and spread the papers before them. The golden locket rested on top, catching the firelight. The elders leaned forward, eyes narrowing as they read. "This is from the famine years?" one of them murmured. "Yes," Cato said. "It tells how Amelie gave her land to save this village. And how that land was taken from her, by the very hands she helped." The room grew silent. The fire cracked softly. Some of the older men lowered their eyes, shame flickering across their faces. One of them with a trembling voice said, "We were wrong. We took what was not ours. She was a good woman. The land remembers her kindness." Cato nodded. "She could not rest because her truth was buried. But now it is found." The head elder, a gray-haired man named Baraka, looked at the papers for a long time before speaking. "Then the land shall return to her name," he said. "And her story will be told again so no one forgets." Cato felt his heart lighten. He left the hall that night with tears in his eyes, but they were not of sorrow. The stars were bright and the wind was gentle, no longer whispering with unrest but calm and warm. He returned to his mother's grave, holding the locket close. The moon shone softly on the mound of earth. He placed the locket there and whispered, "Your truth is free now, Mama. Rest." The air felt still and peaceful. A soft wind passed through the trees, almost like a sigh of relief. Cato smiled through his tears, knowing that his mother could finally sleep. Morning light spread across the village of Njoro, soft and golden. The sound of roosters echoed through the valley, and smoke rose slowly from cooking fires. But inside Cato's heart there was no peace. He had barely slept. All night he had turned in his bed, hearing his mother's words again and again, "The truth lies under my grave." Now that the truth had been found, he knew what he must do. He sat by the small wooden box on his table, his mother's locket shining beside it. The papers inside were still there, folded carefully, proof of what had been done long ago. Cato looked at them and whispered, "It's time, Mama. The village must know." He stepped outside and called for one of the young messengers. "Go to the elders," he said. "Tell them to meet me at the council ground when the sun is high. And call the people too. This matter belongs to everyone." The boy nodded and ran off, his bare feet kicking up dust along the path. Word spread quickly through Njoro. Cato, the son of Amelie, was calling the elders for a meeting. The villagers began to murmur among themselves. "What is this about?" some asked. "Has he found something about his mother?" By the time the sun rose high, nearly the whole village had gathered under the big acacia tree in the center of Njoro. The elders sat in a semicircle, their robes flowing, their faces calm but uneasy. Cato stood before them, holding the box in his hands. There was a deep silence. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of dust and grass. Cato took a breath, his voice steady but full of emotion. "My mother, Amelie, was buried 3 times. Each time she came back to the earth. I asked myself why she could not rest. And now I know." The people leaned closer. Cato placed the box on a wooden stool. "Last night I found this buried beneath her grave. Inside were her locket and papers that tell a story this village has forgotten." He opened the box and lifted one of the papers for all to see. "Many years ago, when famine came to Njoro, my mother gave up her land to save this village. She sold everything she had to buy food to feed the children and the weak. But when the famine passed, the land was not returned. The elders of that time took it and placed their names upon it." A heavy silence fell. The people looked at one another, shocked. Whispers began to rise among them, words like "Amelie" and "she saved us." The elders shifted in their seats. Some looked away while others stared at the ground. Finally one of them spoke. It was Baba Jimo, the oldest among them, a man whose face was lined with both age and regret. He stood slowly, leaning on his staff. "My son," he said softly, "what you speak is true. The elders of that time, including me, took what did not belong to us. We were afraid the land would be lost forever. But in doing so, we took from the one who saved us all." His words carried through the air like a stone dropped into still water. The crowd grew quiet again. Baba Jumo turned to face the people. "Emily was a woman of great heart. She gave without asking, and we repaid her with silence. For years I have carried this weight, but I was too proud to speak." His voice trembled. "Now, before the spirits and before this village, I confess our wrong. The land she gave must return to her family, to her son." Cato bowed his head, his throat tight. He did not speak, but tears filled his eyes. The other elders looked at Baba Jumo, then at one another. One by one they stood. "He speaks the truth," said one. "We knew it but feared what it would mean to admit it." Another added, "We forgot her kindness, but the earth did not. That is why she could not rest." The people of Njoro began to murmur again, not in anger but in sorrow. Many of them had been children during the famine. Some remembered how Emily had given them porridge when they were starving. Others recalled how she had walked miles to fetch water for the sick. An old woman in the crowd began to weep. "I remember," she said. "She gave me food when my mother had none. She told me to stay strong. We cannot let her name be forgotten." The sound of her crying spread emotion through the crowd. Soon others began to speak, stories of Emily's kindness, her laughter, her strength. Baba Jumo raised his staff and said, "Let this day be known as the day of confession. Let the name of Emily be spoken again with honor." He turned to Cato. "My son, forgive us. Your mother's land shall return to her name. You will have the papers rewritten, sealed with truth, not lies. And her story will be told to every child born in Joro." Cato took a step forward. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "I do not ask for revenge," he said. "I ask only that her truth be remembered. Let the land bear her name again and let her spirit rest." Baba Jumo nodded and placed his hand on Cato's shoulder. "Then it shall be so." He turned to the crowd. "People of Njoro, bear witness. Today we return what was taken. Let Emily's name be carved again upon her land." The villagers lifted their voices in agreement. Some clapped, others bowed their heads in respect. The air was filled with emotion, sadness, relief, and something new, peace. After the meeting ended, Cato walked alone to his mother's grave. The evening sun glowed soft and orange, painting the hills in light. He carried the golden locket and the papers that had changed everything. He knelt beside the mound of earth and spoke quietly. "Mama, they know now. The truth is free. You can rest." The wind stirred gently, moving the grass around the grave. It brushed against his cheek like a soft caress. For the first time since her death, Cato felt calm. The weight in his chest lifted. He placed the locket back into the soil, pressing it gently. "This belongs here," he whispered. "With you." As he stood, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear. The village bells rang softly in the distance, a sound of peace, not sorrow. That night, the people of Njoro gathered around small fires, telling stories of Emily, the woman who gave everything and asked for nothing. They spoke her name with respect, and children listened with wide eyes. In every story they said the same words: kindness never dies. It lives in the earth, in the wind, and in the hearts of those who remember. And from that day, whenever someone passed Emily's land, they would bow their heads and whisper, "Rest now, mother of Njoro." Evening came softly over the village of Njoro, bathing the hills in gold. The sun was sinking behind the acacia trees, and the air carried a quiet calm that had not been felt for many days. For the first time since Emily's passing, peace seemed to hover over the village like a gentle cloud. The people gathered once more near her grave, not in fear this time but in gratitude and love. Cato stood at the front, his face calm, his eyes steady. He held a small bundle of wildflowers, the same kind his mother used to grow behind their old hut. The villagers surrounded him, holding lamps and candles. The flames flickered softly in the dusk, glowing like stars scattered across the earth. There was no whispering, no worry, no fear of what might happen next. Only silence, the kind that carried respect. The drums began to play, slow and deep, their rhythm steady like the heartbeat of the land itself. Women sang old songs, ones that Emily used to hum while grinding millet or drawing water from the river. The melody was soft, full of sorrow and beauty. Their voices rose and fell like the wind through tall grass. As the song flowed through the night, Baba Jumo stepped forward. His old hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "Today," he said, "we bury Amelie not with guilt but with honor. She gave her land and her life for this village. Her truth has been spoken. Let the earth now hold her gently." The people bowed their heads. Cato knelt and placed the flowers upon the grave. His hands brushed the soil, warm from the day's sun. For a moment he stayed there quietly, remembering her voice, her laughter, and her stories by the fire. He remembered how she used to place her hand on his head and say, "Do good even when no one sees." He whispered, "You did good, Mama. Everyone sees now." One by one the villagers came forward, placing small gifts upon the grave: a woven bracelet, a handful of grain, a calabash of milk, and many flowers. Each gift was a sign of thanks. Some wept softly as they prayed. Others simply stood in silence, letting the wind carry their thoughts to her spirit. When the ceremony ended, the people did not rush away. They lingered, watching as the moon climbed into the sky. The grave looked peaceful beneath its light. A cool breeze passed through the trees, rustling the leaves, almost as if the earth itself had sighed in relief. Cato looked up, feeling that same wind brush against his cheek. It reminded him of his mother's touch, soft, caring, full of love. He closed his eyes and smiled. "Now you can rest, Mama," he said quietly. The next morning, when the first rays of sun touched the ground, the villagers came again to the burial site. For days they had feared that Amelie would rise once more, her body refusing to stay buried. But now the grave was still and untouched. The earth was firm, the flowers undisturbed. The people looked at one another with wide eyes, not in fear but in awe. "She is resting," whispered one woman. "The truth has set her free." Children who had once been told to stay away from the graveyard now came with baskets of flowers. They spread petals over the ground, laughing softly as they played. The older women smiled, watching them. "Even in death she brings life," said one. Over the next few days the mood of the whole village began to change. The people of Njoro started to speak more kindly, to help one another more freely. They said it was Amelie's spirit reminding them that goodness never fades, not even after death. Baba Jumo gathered the village once again, this time for a new tradition. "From this day," he declared, "every year at this time we will honor Amelie. We will tell our children about the woman who gave her land to save her people, and whose spirit stayed to see truth rise again." And so it began. Each year, when the dry winds came, the people of Njoro would bring offerings to her grave. They would tell stories, sing songs, and share food in her name. The children grew up hearing her story, not as a tale of fear but as a lesson of truth and love. Cato took care of his mother's land. He built a small garden there, planting herbs and flowers, the same ones she once used for healing. He shared the herbs freely with anyone who needed them, saying, "This land healed my mother's soul. Let it heal others too." In the evenings he would sit near her grave, watching the sun sink behind the trees. Sometimes he would speak to her aloud as if she were beside him. "Mama," he would say, "I hope you can see what you left behind. The people remember you now. You are no longer just my mother, you are the heart of Njoro." As time passed, travelers from other villages began to visit. They had heard the story of the woman who could not stay buried until her truth was known. They came to see her resting place, to touch the soil, to leave small gifts. Some said the air around her grave felt different, lighter. Others claimed that when they stood there, they could feel peace settle in their hearts. Cato never tried to explain it. He only smiled and said, "That's just my mother saying hello." The years went by, and the story of Amelie spread far beyond Njoro. People spoke her name with respect, telling their children, "Truth will always rise no matter how long it sleeps." And on quiet nights, when the wind blew softly through the trees, the villagers would pause and listen. They said they could hear a whisper in the wind, a woman's gentle voice humming the same song she used to sing. It was not frightening, only comforting, like the sound of a mother watching over her children. Sometimes Cato would stand under the stars, his hands behind his back, listening too. The night air would wrap around him and he would close his eyes. "You stayed with me until I was ready," he would murmur. "Now you can rest and I can live." And so, peace returned fully to Njoro. The land grew green again. The people laughed freely. The village that had once carried fear now carried love. They never forgot the woman who gave everything, and whose spirit refused to rest until justice was done. Whenever the wind passed through the fields, bending the tall grass, the villagers would smile softly and say, "Amelie walks with us." And her son, standing by her grave, would always whisper the same words, a promise, a farewell, and a prayer. "Now you can rest, Mama."